Hi and welcome to Magic Gathering Strat. This is something very new. We are going to do a Pauper Chat, and we have a special guest, one of the great thinkers in Pauper, and I think he has the longest list of results on MTGO stats for Pauper of all the Pauper players. Can that be the case?
I, I don't know. I haven't been on there in a while.
And this is Deluxeicoff. And we are yeah, welcome.
Thank you.
And this is the first time I ever interview someone, which you will probably notice. We are here to talk about Pauper in general, and we are also here to talk about your most recent deck
Yes.
that you call Hexchant, right?
Yeah, I call it that. Most people call it Hexproof. We should probably call it that so people know what we're talking about. It's just kind of the standard evolution from Stompy to getting tired of having your guys messed with, and also the printing of things like Ethereal Armor and Ancestral Mask, which put it over the top. I mentioned in one case that the main reason this deck won for quite a few months when I first brought it out was the newness of it. Just sin awful, but he's a great Magic player. His real name's Paul, and anyway, he's always been teasing me, like if I see spoilers just like anybody else, and I get this horrible card optimism, and I'll just assume things do A, B, and C as they're written, and then X, Y, and Z on top of that. And he's kind of a rules guru, and he'll be like, "Well, actually, no, it's only this," and I'll be like, "Oh man, then I don't want it," But in the case of Ethereal Armor, it was kind of the opposite, where it was the real case. It was like, "So, what am I reading wrong here?" And he goes, "Nope, that's what it does." And I was like, "Wow." Oh, getting some feedback.
That must be the perfect complement to a master brewer, a judge that can tell you how things work.
Yeah. It really was. In fact, when I first started playing, paper tournament, which has been a long time, was a Pro Tour New Orleans, and I think that was in like 2000, 2001 or two, and it was Invasion block constructed, and yeah, I was laughable at my rules knowledge. I was just a kitchen table player mostly at the time. It was right around the time when the beta client for Magic was coming out, and boy, that interface as a visual learner really helped me learn because I was able to see the stack and stuff and all these things he was telling. But before that, I didn't know, and I got to it was like 14-hour long tournament. I was playing a blue-green tempo deck with Mystic Snakes and Blurred Mongoose, kind of a hexproof throwback even back then. See, I don't like my stuff to be messed with, I guess. Maybe it's a personal thing. But anyway, I played all day long, and then by about 9 p.m. it was down to the finals, and I had made it with the lack of my rules knowledge and learning a heck of a lot in the way. But since then, I definitely know what's up. But it was some hard lessons and some hard beats. I remember losing a Grand Prix qualifier because I didn't realize, and this is something I run into almost every tournament, that trample damage, just the way it worked. Like if you have an armadillo cloak on, like say a Shivan Worm, which was the case in that tournament, and I didn't attack because I didn't know that the damage happens and then the life gain happens, because my opponent was like at 6 life and he couldn't block, and I figured, well, if I attack for was it like a 9/9 trample lifelink, it's just going to equal 0. And it's like, no. First the damage happens, then the life happens. And unfortunately, the same player at that time was next to me, and it was a team match, and I lost it for us. So
Oh,
it was a very hard lesson learned.
oh, that's bad.
Yeah.
Looking at the deck here, I've seen that you've changed the main deck enchantments. There seem to be like one enchantment of 4 spots that the other players also tend to choose different enchantments.
Right. Yeah. I mean, do you have well, I mean, I can go down the list.
No, I think the core of the deck is, of course, the Ethereal Armors, the Ancestral Mask, the 16 creatures.
Uh-huh.
Some people play 4 Ancestral Mask, but you only play 3.
Right.
Any
Ancestral
comment on
Mask.
that?
Yeah, Ancestral Mask is just, and I'm a lover of 4. It's like I look at a card, and if I like it, that's fine. If I love it, why aren't there 4 of them in there? And one of
Yeah.
the only arguments against that is, casting cost. And one of my other good friends online, Lidofight, his real name's Chris. He's the guy that taught me Magic, and I learned from a very early stage that the curve, the tempo, I just love curve and tempo, and it just, when you sort by mana cost, any of my decks that I've made, it's just an avalanche of, it looks like a waveform that's decaying. It's like the 1 casting cost is everywhere. Then there's some 2s and a little bit of 3s. And
Yeah, it's very apparent in Soul Sisters.
right, yeah, incredibly rare to have
And Stompy.
4.
Yep.
Right. And it's true to the format. I mean, you got to come out of the gate swinging if you're gonna play my style, which is usually aggro tempo. I'd probably put onto it, but the reason for so that goes back to the reason for 3 Ancestral Masks. I love the card, but and I do own a 4th, but there are times even with 3, slow draws happen. You throw out your creature and you have an Ancestral Mask, and it's like, whoa, that's doing a lot of good. It needs its other players there. So other than the Ancestral Mask, I could see some players go down to 3 Gnarlids. That's valid. It's such a backbreaker, the Gnarlid. I mean, it basically asks the person, do you have removal right now? And if they don't, they usually lose. And if they do, a lot of times it's a sacrificial effect, and it just buys your hexproof creatures more time, which is, if you'll notice the list that I sent you, my latest incarnation of the deck has 4 Bond Beetles main. And
Yeah, I have it in front of me on the screen right now.
yeah, and boy, that has gone through so many changes. Those 4 spots. I mean,
That's
I've
the
played.
4 spots I'm talking about.
Oh, I apologize. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's gone from everything from Spider Climb to the Vitality Charm or the Seedling Charm. I forget the one that regenerates.
Vitality Charm.
Yeah, but and that on paper those things look great, and even I've seen mention of Vines of Basswood even, but when it came down to actual gameplay, and that's another thing, on paper it's like, okay, yeah, these things add up, but in gameplay, you a lot of times I like to play with a tracer card, and what I mean by that is, like, let's say you have 1 card in question, I want to have a foil version of one of them. You put it in the deck, and when you play casually, when you see the foil come up, you say, okay, now what do I want that card to be? And it's kind of like a tracer round in the military with their guns and stuff, so they can see where the bullets are going. That's been a valuable tool, and so many of the times the cards are too passive, and I really like to play actively. I like things that do something now, and the Bond Beetle, it immediately, it's either a blocker or it boosts something that's already out there. It plays now. I mean, it can kill Phantasmal Bears, which I do quite often. It's it's also acts as a 4-round tracer when you're sideboarding. Like, let's say you're not going against Post or some sort of curfew edict deck, you immediately have 4 spots just whoop, they just opened up.
That's valuable. It's often very hard. Stompy is a hard deck, right, to sideboard out of.
Yeah. I mean, I get that a lot. And to anybody listening out there, sometimes I think I might come across as a jerk online. You just have to realize, and I'm in a privileged position to say this, when I'm online, sometimes I want to use my son's username, because sometimes if I've been having success with a deck, I'll get 3 or 4 messages, like, I don't know, every 10 minutes, and it's always the same stuff, like, how do you sideboard, how do you do this, how do you do that? Because anybody can get the lists, but it's kind of frustrating. Sometimes I can get a little snappy if it's like the 9th or 10th screen that pops up and I'm trying to play a game or focus, and I can only shove people to the side for so long, and before those things come to fruition. But with regards to the deck, that's why I settled on Bond Beetle. It's an active mechanic. The new Predatory Urge, I think it is, where it slowly gives it a +1/1 counter. Great theory.
Forced predation. Forced predation. Yeah.
Yes, that's, apologize, guys.
Forced adaptation. That's
the one.
Sorry.
That one's my theory in that, I played that for about a week, was that like Fisser Storm is very popular right now, and it's a hard matchup. for Hexproof. You wouldn't think so, but after they bounce all your enchantments, you're only attacking them with little 1/1 guys, and they usually can block and kill. So I needed a permanent way to make my 1/1 guys better. Thinking that was the case, what are they going to do? Bounce it? Every turn I'll make it stronger. But in reality, against a good player, they can Fisser Storm that every turn, and usually you were left at best with a 2/2 Hexproof. So Bond Beetle puts a neat conundrum in the way. The first time I'll play a Fisser Storm player, they'll bounce it, and then when they see, okay, replay a forest, and now my Sohana's a 3/3, or something like that, they quickly start getting it, and that adds to the time, the number of ways you can block later on. And against that deck, it is incredibly important to watch that clock. And a lot of people get mad at me for saying this. You ask questions to your opponent the second they're on it. Ask them about deck choices. Those little 20-second flurries of, hey, what? That's interesting. You like that card? Or, check out that artwork. These are things that, back from my poker days, as we were talking earlier before we started recording, that I'm up the camp that when you're in a fight, you fight to win, and if the clock isn't there, the game would just be the Wild West. It's a valid way to win, just like it is in chess.
Yes, I completely agree.
Yeah, and it's like, imagine yourself against a really hard opponent in a street fight or something, and you get knocked to the ground, and there's some pebbles and dirt. You grab it and you throw it in their face. That's true martial arts, using your surroundings, using every available aspect. And I get a lot of, I guess the term would be haters out there that, oh, if you were really any good, you wouldn't have to do that. And it's like, that happens maybe 1%, less than that, of the games. But
I find it happens a lot more often than 1%.
Yeah, I'm probably guarding that just so I don't have it.
Not specifically with you, but overall.
Yeah.
But especially with Cloudpost players.
Yes, yeah. Of course, when you in fact, I have a quote on my Magic Online account that says it all, because I got so tired of writing it. And if you look at my name, it just says, gosh, it's been so long since I've looked at it. I don't quite remember it, if I remember what it says, but it says, let me look here.
I'm so lucky. I keep drawing cards that I put in my deck. It's amazing.
Yeah, and especially when you brew stuff that almost everything I choose is a 4 of. And it just cracks me up how people will, when they draw it, it's their skill, and when I draw it, I'm lucky, and it's just an amusing thing. And my wife and friends always kind of laugh, sometimes when somebody gets really bent out of shape, I just have to take a deep breath and realize that, maybe they're like some 12-year-old from Brazil or something, and so I can't ride them too hard.
So, the sideboard in Hexchant has also changed around quite a bit. Can you say something about the sideboard?
Of course, yeah. With the absence of Storm, which was always a sort of a selfish pleasure to play that deck, because back when I had to have Benevolent Unicorn, and against most lists you needed the Standard Bearer as well. It was possible to race them, and I actually did have about a 51% win ratio against them. It was tough, but
wow.
Due to them fizzing out and stuff, but it's still warranted enough to play this. So back then, one of the hardest parts wasn't Grape Shot. It was Empty the Warrens. This deck, attack once or twice and gain some life and such, but it couldn't do much against the Goblin token, so that's why I had Moment's Peace and Spore Frogs. It was just that extra insurance, and I brought in Spore Frogs before I had Bomb Beetles against Edict Effects and such like that. But with the absence of that, and most deck brewers out there really like the bannings, you have just a plethora of things to open up. So yes. What I did was I was looking at the one bad thing about Hexchant, as I already mentioned, the Fisser Storm deck. It's a tough matchup. You win maybe 40-45% of the time if you're really on your A game against a good pilot. So that's the one problem. And the only other real problem is Muck, which, mono blue fairies, with their incredibly fast tempo starts and the ability to counter clutch spells, as everybody knows or has been a victim of. It comes down to who goes first in that matchup, and I wanted a way to swing that. I messed around with Squall a bit, which does 2 damage to every creature with flying, and kind of demands a hard counter. In reality, it's very rare that any sort of fairy count up is going to be able to attribute any sort of board control to that state. But again, like we were talking earlier, that is a passive answer. I have to wait for the fairies, and then you get caught in that conundrum of, well, should I do it now, or should I wait till one more cloud of fairies comes out, or it's a timing issue in a deck that you want to be doing stuff now. So Ashas Favor, when I first made the deck, I had 2 of those main deck, and it proved itself back then as it's kind of a one-sided fog. I mean, imagine facing down like a 7/7 first strike, trample, maybe even life gain flyer. That's something that puts up a fight in extended, or even legacy. And it acts as just this huge roadblock when you have stuff like Silhana or the Gnarlid coming in for free every turn. It only takes 1 or 2 turns of that. So with the synergy of it being an enchantment-based strategy, I for now have gone with Ashas Favor against Muck, and that's and the you've noticed the Fairy Macabre in the sideboard is the instant surprise for the wall or the graveyard shenanigans that keep getting back the flicker life with the Glimmer Post, or drawing with cards, and it's won some clutch games, and obviously against the UG Post or Fisser Storm variants, you bring in Thermokarst and Fairy Macabre, and in fact you need to also be aware too of the opponent's clock. If it's game 3 and they've got that deck has a hard time winning outside of about 6 to 7 minute mark, and if you're close, you need to bring in your Spore Frog or your Moment's Peace. Not all of them, but some of them, because they don't account for that in their math. And there's been a few times they have to Fisser Storm, which they can do if they've got the lock, but they've got to build up that count, and that's precious seconds. That's 50 seconds as opposed to 7 that it takes to attack. So these are considerations that you have to do when you're playing this deck.
Yes. Do you feel that Edict Effects stop you, or are they just nuisances? That is MBC a hard matchup if they pack 4 Edict Effects?
Yeah, I'm not going to lie and say it isn't. It comes down it's just who draws better. I mean, obviously if the person is sitting on let's say 3 swamps and 4 innocent bloods, I'm probably not going to win that game. And in some sideboard cases that does feel that way. I had a really heartbreaking loss the other day. The guy was at like 1 life, and I had the Bond Beetle out. I had the Silhana out. It was like a 6/6, and it was obviously lethal the next turn. He couldn't block anything, and he drew a gosh, what was it? I think it was a tragic slip for the token, followed by an edict that he top decked, and he actually admitted it. And I was like, well, just like my quote says, that happens. I'm not going to I'm not bent out of shape over that. But it is tragic when that happens, because as a brewer, it's my favorite thing in Magic is sitting down and I just picture the interface as this huge pot of stew, and all the cards are in there, and I'm like, oh, let's add 2 parts of this, and then it bubbles a little bit, and it's like, that's interesting. Rub my hands greedily over the the cauldron. These are the things I envision anyway. But I just love that part of it. And so when your recipe goes bad or something, or it doesn't quite work, like maybe I should have added 2 parts of this or something. But for the most part, especially Bond Beetle being main, that really throws a wrench to the works. And I still, even against hate decks, come out usually on top. And for the funniest reason, like against Stompy, my old favorite, they really dilute their sideboards with things like Serene Heart and even Multani's, I think, Decree is called. And in reality, just like I was referencing before with Squall versus Muck, it's one of those. It's so situational, and so often they end up playing like a Serene Heart, and it kills. Well, it returns their rancor and my rancor to my hand, kills maybe an enchant land, and at best 1 other card. And so then I replay the rancor, maybe another thing, and I attack again. And it's just, it costs them a card, and me maybe like 20% of my tempo. I just don't think it's worth a spot. And like in regards to Stompy, I've never had a list with Lethal Sabotage in it. If that card was an instant and Conspire let you target as many things as you wanted, and you could just keep using like Nettle Sentinel, which I don't think is really out of the question. I mean, your opponent would have to be just on a crazy, stratified sort of strategy where it's like just affinity or just enchantments. Then I would play it, but the card's just incredibly weak, and I probably shouldn't say this, but I actually kind of find it happy when I look up someone's deck list and I know I'm playing against them, and they have a lot of hate for it, because I just know it's like the probably the 3 times I've lost against Stompy, as I mentioned, I think the text to you was I draw slow, or like I'll just be egocentric and just say, I've got this match, and I don't even have a creature in my opening hand, which I've learned not to do. But against Stompy, and they come out just incredibly quick, and when that happens, they have a chance. When they dilute the strategy down with a bunch of destroy enchantment effects, it gets pretty silly.
Yeah, isn't that very true for Stompy overall, that as soon as you start boarding heavily in Stompy with Gleeful Sabotages and other such cards, that you just dilute the deck very easily?
Yeah, and I one of the best Affinity players I've ever met is it goes by the name of Special Kyle on.
Yeah, I know who it is.
I think playing Stompy against him, I've maybe won like 10 times to my 100 losses. I mean, I love truly being beaten. It's I think any player that plays pretty semi, a grinder, kind of professional, it's kind of a rarity to get beaten over and over again. It's nice to have kind of a sensei of it like that. I'm not a good Affinity player, but he sure as hell is, and one of the downloads I gathered from him was Bone Splitter effects are what those players really hate, because all of a sudden your quick plays that nibble them down to 14 or 12 life, now they're 4/2s or whatever, and they can trade, and they can keep trading, and so as opposed back when Affinity was the only reason for something like a Gleeful Sabotage, I would always argue much better to just play a Bone Splitter, and then you have extra ammo against things that, like a Standard Bearer, that, well, okay, fine, I'll put a Bone Splitter on, take that, have your silly 1/1. So there's a little bit of Stompy background for you.
But overall, your preference is to be active in your sideboarding choices, as compared to being reactive.
Yes, it's that's me, and if people like the decks that I've brewed, whether it's Deluxeicoff or Stompy, White Weenie, White Life, or this Hexchant, or I should say Hexproof, trying to retrain my brain version, they need to know that's where I'm coming from. And in my background, I have a phrase that a lot of it sounds so egocentric to say followers, but people that care about what you're playing and stuff, they've learned to accept as be the problem. I couldn't have come up with a simpler, aggressive way to remember it than that one sentence. And obviously, things like even Moment's Peace can be the problem, because it's a time walk at Pauper, and I mean, playing 4 of them in the sideboard is like playing 8 time walks in a lot of matches. I just had a finals match. I think it was on Tuesday. I went 4-0, and believe it or not, in the finals I met White Weenie, and I thought that deck was completely dead. I was
shocked.
God! Yeah, really? I was shocked.
Who was the player?
I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm just rambling here. I didn't know.
No, please go on. I love it.
But played 4 Prismatic Strands in the 3rd game. He actually managed to win off me in the first game, or no, the second game. And again, a case where if I had to rank the easiest deck to beat, it would probably be White Weenie, quickly followed by Stompy or Affinity, and Post, the standard blue-red version. Yep. So anyway, I get kind of like full of my deck, and I'm like, I don't need a creature, blah blah. Like I said, I've learned since, it's like, well, I've got to have a little bit of respect. So anyway, he brings in these. I'm like at 3 life for the majority of the game. I can't draw my Armadillo Cloak, but I've got a Gnarlid and a Silhana active, and I keep bashing him, and he keeps Prismatic Stranding, and he keeps coming at me, and I keep Moments Piecing, and then it comes down to this thing where I've got I think it was a Boggle with Armadillo Cloak and Ethereal Armor on it. So he would attack, and one time he forgot, which is unforgivable, I think. I mean, first strike says right on there, and I blocked his Razor Golem with like a, I don't know, it's a 6/6 first strike life gain. So damage happens, I gave my life, and then I Moment's Peace. And that
Nice.
that's pretty funny, pretty fast, because he's in a predicament now where he's on his last Prismatic Strands, which I know because his graveyard's got only one left, and does he do it now or does he try to save the game later? So he had to let the Golem go, and that bought me enough life to. So it's tricks like that. First strike. That's another reason Ashas Favor in the sideboard. So many players look over that trample issue I mentioned earlier with my Grand Prix debacle with the I think it was the Shivan Worm at the time out of what was that, the Evasion block. There's so many times, and when I'm losing, I'll do that often. Like, let's say I'm playing against a Muck player and I have 3 life, and no, let's say I have 7 life, and they have a Spellstutter Sprite and a flipped over Delver. So I'll put Armadillo Cloak as my last little hoorah move on one of their creatures, let's say the Delver, to learn information about the player. Because if they don't attack, now I know they don't know that secret. And I kid you not, about 70% of people won't attack.
Wow.
And there has been times when I'll top deck and answer, and then I win the game when I shouldn't have. These are things, but going back to those poker plays, is that a shady move to do? I don't know. Is not knowing your card? I mean, I wouldn't have faulted somebody for doing that to me, and it has worked against me back, when I used to play paper. So that's something to keep in mind. Yeah, you're about to lose the game. What can you get out of it? Let's use an enchantment to your advantage. Let's get some free information about the history of this player, and so that's another neat trick that you can use.
That sounds pretty clever. So, what would you say about playing versus control and baiting?
Oh yes, one of my favorite things to do.
Yeah, I know.
When you're playing one color like Stompy, which I'm a huge fan of monocolor strategies, but that's something that isn't as viable. Let me explain. If I play say I'm playing against, Muck Fairies, mono blue, and I first turn Guildgate, maybe they play Delver, second turn Forest. Actually, let's rewind. Let's say they're going first and they play an island, and it's go. I play a Guildgate, pass. They play an island, and it's back to my turn. I play a forest. Now, in my hand, I may have, let's say I have, a 1/1 creature, one of the hexproof ones, and let's say it hits the board, and then on turn 3, they play their Cloud of Fairies and untap, obviously baiting that it's a spell starter coming up next, and then it's my turn again. So now, I've got an interesting scenario. So in this case, let's say against this matchup, I want Ethereal Armor to stick. I want it to be a 2/2 first strike, because it's, outside of Echoing Truth, which is kind of absent now because of, Empty the Thorns being gone. I want that to stick. So maybe I play another Forest, and I will tap all 3, and then you count a few seconds, maybe even truly visualize, like having maybe an Armadillo Cloak. Then you untap. Then you maybe play or tap untap real quick again, just kind of like you're hesitant, and then maybe you play, 1 green and put out a Rancor. You're trying to bait that counter, and so many players are what I call counter happy. It's the very first thing you do, they're going to counter it, and so obviously you have to play a kind of a curve of like Mother May I sort of thing, as we say in the States, where you have to ask it. So they'll say okay or no. They jump right on it, and then bam, down comes Ethereal Armor, just in case they're playing Days with the 1 floating. Boom, then you play maybe it's an Abundant Growth to make it like a 3 or 4/4 first strike. Those are the kind of things that you can play against. I just lost last night in the finals to a really good player. I ought to give him props and look at my game history. I think his name was.
What was he playing?
He was playing mono blue, and I think that was the last game I played. My list here says it was my Farah Dela 88.
Okay.
It's MIFRADELA 88, but he was the exception to the rule. He definitely probably has been a victim of baiting, and he played brilliantly. And I really, it's my wife always kind of giggles when I come away from a tournament, often losing, and I had the best time ever. It was just, and I'm sure any true sport fan of the game knows that feeling where I don't mind losing. I mean, I don't mind being beaten. I hate losing. And if somebody just beats me and they outdraw me and they play better, and they there was no mistakes that I could see part of, I have no problem. That's why when I play Stompy, I love to face Special Kyle with Affinity, because he just destroys me the majority of the time. And when I win, it's so much more satisfying than just steamrolling somebody that I'm supposed to win. And so that was the case there, where just it was 12 hours ago. About I was sitting there and about to log off for the night, and I was like, man, that it leaves you with a very good feeling. And I just got beaten, but there were things I would do, just like I explained, where I would try to bait that ethereal armor out, and it was a no-go. He knew it was up, and then when the real thing came down, he had the counter and the snap, and it was just a thing of beauty. And it should be said too that I tried Mezel is one of the the best Muckfade players out there, and I used his list for probably 3 or 4 tournaments for a while there. The numbers added up with the metagame, Storm and such, and he was gracious enough to tell me kind of what he sides in and out. And I tried it, and my favorite strategy is tempo, and I'm not against playing counters, but it has to be tempo based, and I don't think anybody can argue that is. But boy, I tell you, I had the worst results with that deck. I just and on replays, I didn't really see many players. Sometimes you get the feeling that certain decks just don't like you.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I can't explain it really, but it's there.
Maybe some mathematician or some really heady person will figure out some quantum theory of gaming, or when you go against the grain of nature. I don't know what it is, but boy, it happens to me. And green's probably traditionally my least favorite color, and yet I'm kind of known in the last 2 years to play mostly Stompy or Hexchant, Hexproof for the longest time, but you have to play what works.
Oh. One problem I've been having with this Hexchant deck is that it's mulligans. So I sit there and I'm always lacking something. So
Yeah.
And you have to have the creature, the enchantment, or the enchantments, and the land, and it's very hard to get all of them at one time.
Yeah, I haven't really experienced it too much. I won't lie and say, in an average tournament, I'll have probably 2 hands where I have to throw it back. Just if you look at the actual percentage of the split with enchantments, creatures, and lands, it is kind of a pie chart of thirds for a reason. But there's that it does happen, and I will say, no discredit to anybody that has beat me in the last few months with this deck. The majority of the time, if you do replay those losses, I would mulligan down to 4, sometimes 3. Gosh, about a week ago, 1.
Oh my god!
I got within 1 point of winning that one. That would have been incredibly insulting to the other person.
Yeah, that would have been the greatest achievement ever.
Well, I wish I could say it was true, but I did fall short by 1 damage. But yeah, every deck has, obviously you stretch a lot of colors. You get a selfish mana base, these sorts of things. You're viable to things not going your way, just like the post player with all his glimmer posts hiding at the bottom of a deck against aggro. Sometimes things work out. I have truly considered maybe cutting 1 Bond Beetle and adding 1 more Forest. But again, like we mentioned, gosh, we've been talking way too much about this deck, but about a half hour ago.
No, yeah, this is so good. So yeah,
I appreciate it. But the part I mentioned,
yeah.
Maybe and hopefully you're playing with matching permanents. But if you want in private or situational games, you play maybe with that foil forest. So hey, here's that extra land that I thought would be good in this deck. Am I flooded when I'm seeing it, or is it a lifesaver when I'm seeing it? Mm. And there's another way you can use tracers in practice games where you can, or if you want to give up free info, play it in a tournament that way. a quick aside, real quick. I've always been and it's not just because I'm kind of a neat freak, but your permanent should all match. And
I want to save that point to the next segment actually.
Okay, no problem.
So we'll talk about matching permanents later. Because I have a story there. I don't know if you remember it, but we'll come back to that.
Oh.
Do you feel that we have covered the Hexchant deck?
Yeah, I definitely, Very Macabre is nothing to laugh about. I've even toyed with the idea of playing 4 on my sideboard because, against a good player, they go off pretty fast, turn 3 or 4, and lacking any sort of card draw, you kind of want to be sitting on that. And that's another reason I like 4-ofs. It's like, do you want to see it in your opening hand? And those are, rare exceptions when, something like a Gnarlid, it's just so powerful that it justifies having 4, or the Armadillo Cloak with the tempo that it grants you in the form of life gain, which is real tempo, by the way. I mean, it's not just I bounce your thing and then I have a man. It's life totals, fogs, these sorts of things. These are a lot of perceived tempos that people don't always understand or give enough credit to, and they usually end up, with the whole luck category saying why you won because you had 2 moments pieces, and it's like, yeah, somebody snuck those into my deck and uploaded it for me. Sorry about that.
Well, thank you for talking about the Hexchant deck, and we'll see you return in future segments.
It's been great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.